This is Hunting Fields by Dr. Peter Colla, narrated by the Hooded Vigilante. Chapter 14 of Angels and Angelo. God grants us one thing with each day created new, and that is that we will experience an entire day's worth of bombardments of energy. Exactly what lies behind the energies and the intent for them to deliver love or hate is based purely on two factors: the free will of those who bring another into receiving of said intent, and the decision of the other to interpret what they will, choosing again to see only the good, every beam of light, even if it's hidden inside of the deepest coffin of darkness, or focus on the darkness and run the risk of missing the light altogether. It is choice, which is again free will. The little girl sits watching the droplets that have formed on the cage before her face. And while they have never taken her, as far as she can remember, the thoughts that she might at any moment be taken down into the horrible darkness, where there's only anger and screams of torment, waits, haunts her like the dark shadow, waiting just beyond the ability to perceive. She hums to calm herself, with 12 sounds, hearing words in the dark. I remember when I first noticed that you liked me back. She quietly sings to herself, almost in whispers in the dark. With each scream, the movement of the waters that cover the ground just within the reflections of yet another water drop ripples, as if by their own ability, in turns translating the sound into pulses of dim yet distinct light, subtle with distinguishable lips moving across the surface, tell its own stories, and ever again speaking of the memories of the pleas being desperately given. She always has felt angel wings stir the surface as they bring God's responding tears into the waters of their pleas. But her humming sound seems to make more of a gentle, calming wave than any of the screams are able to produce. She knows the voice, and it is his, the boy who lies in the cage next to her, Angelo. She knows his name because he quietly whispers it to her with his words, but only when the devils finally have left at night. Prior to Angelo appearing, all she ever did was stare at the bars and hum softly to herself in tones that seemed to calm the torturous movements of light across the droplets that formed on the bars and other places nearby. Angelo always asked her to hum those sounds, as they seemed to calm him into a deep sleep, especially after being so upset, being thrown back into the cage when the demons in the white finished with him. More distant screams, and she hums again. You are lying there crying alone, but I am crying too. She doesn't remember ever learning to speak or really understand how she knows. She dreams and words are spoken, and sometimes she can hear the guards outside the dark doors. Yet the sounds they make match the light movements on the bars before her eyes, and she knows which words are pleas for mercy and which have other meanings. The malevolent ones are mostly filled with darkness that only can be released with the darkest of sounds themselves. And since all these sounds emit even the softest lights as they dance across the waters, coating the bars and floors of her prison, she seems also to know deep within her what sounds soften the light and which ones are hateful in nature. All the sounds make light, and she also knows in the dark, cold, and painful place, the only good thing is the light. So the sounds of events, scary as they are, must be good too, because they also come from people. Angela has been here the longest now, more than many months. She hears the guards talking about him, that he can't hear well and he is stupid, but she knows he's really smart. He hides every word from the doctor, the hunchback, or the guards, but in the night softly talks to me with whispers. She thinks to herself with a small smile as a couple of with and a couple more hums. He is her friend and he loves to hear her hum to him when he comes back from the tunnels. He never said a word to her except those first ones until one day when she started singing to cancel out the screams in the tunnel. She thought he was asleep. It helps him sleep. It was only a couple of days after he first arrived that he started talking to her in the quiet when everyone left. He could hardly believe it when she started talking back, amazed she could talk, when he thought she was just barely a little baby. Then when he overheard the guard say that she was actually 7, he understood, hearing once himself, it was because she was in a cage all the time that she remained small. You remember hearing them say when people keep little kittens or dogs in small cages, they never grow, like a small goldfish in a bowl. One day it's freed and then they grow up just fine. He told her, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. He suddenly turned and started talking to her, mesmerized by how her voice seemed to calm his troubled soul, telling her that other than the love and joy he had read about in the Bible, her voice was the first peace he had experienced his whole life. She knew it was true when she would see vibrations on the water of the screams. Her songs would cancel out the movements, and she suddenly wouldn't hear them herself. Her own voice in her ears, and the screams, the moans, and the cries were suddenly silenced, as if they disappeared from existence. Angela says it's because of the good light chases away the dark shadows of the bad. It was when this place gets quiet that their day actually begins. Angela talks to her all the time when the handlers leave, and they both try to sleep when the monsters come. In the quiet of their days, he tells her about the world outside, about how beautiful it is, and all the places she can go when they finally escape and get out. Angela talks about good. And while he agrees this is a horrible place, there are plenty of other places out in the world that are as bad, if not worse. At least we have food and it's not so cold, he says. Plus, he has learned if you just do what they tell you to, they won't hurt you, at least much. But that doesn't seem to be the case every time. Often they bring them back with bruises or even bleeding, and sometimes they throw him in a cage unconscious. Yet Angela never complains. He just turns and sleeps. The first time she saw the vibrations and hummed more out of nervousness, she vaguely remembers a beautiful woman appearing with white curly hair, humming the songs that she used to hear, and then screamed were silenced. That was so long ago she hardly remembers the time, but many children have come and gone since until Angelo now. The boy later told her with a grunting whisper his name was Angelo, and he told her he couldn't hear, but obviously he can hear her. He smiled when she said that. He marveled that she understood and spoke, even asking who taught her. She didn't know, just knew. He couldn't hear for as long as he could remember, but she heard the white-coated demon say that he was beaten so much at his earlier age by his drunken Indian father and maybe his prostitute mother, that his hearing was permanently gone, and that's why he couldn't talk. Angelo did talk, especially when the demons wanted him to, acting like he didn't hear them, would irritate the witches or the robed ones, but they did seem interested in him responding, unless he chose to. Free will is respected even in the darkest places. He tells her that they do give him pills sometimes and hold his mouth closed until he swallows them. Sometimes he can hide them under his tongue and spit them out later. Sometimes he can't, and they melt. The bitter taste makes him sick. But when When that happens, he prays to God softly to take away any harm they may do to him. Angela taught her how to pray. Praying to God is as easy as talking to me or talking to you, he would tell her. I know this for a fact because every time I talk to God like he is sitting right here next to me, he talks back. Sometimes Jesus would come and many of the children in the cages would speak of seeing this beautiful bearded man with red-brown hair, especially after the devils would leave and when the pain was afflicted down the tunnel. Sometimes it was what Peter felt many times. Angelo said that it is absolutely true. One time they were prodding him so many times with a shock stick, even inside him, but even though the cloud of pain, Jesus came and suddenly he felt nothing, hearing nothing, and stopped crying. It was at this point they stopped hurting him. One attendant said, he cannot register fear like the other children. They are wasting their time. His blood is at best D quality, whatever that meant. After Jesus would appear to the children, none of them ever could remember anything that happened to them in the tunnels. Only his sweet face. It always made her smile or cry with joy as she remembered his eyes and smile. Soon, he would say, you will be with me in paradise, where there's only good memories, light, joy, and love. Love, Angela would say to her, especially in the beginning. Until I met you, I never experienced love in my life. Between the boarding schools and foster homes, bullies, and the cruelty of the streets, he would tell her, surprised she could understand his garbled whispers. Angela became her teacher as he taught her about the world and said he believed in God sent him to teach her these things, while she taught him things she learned. He said she also taught him things too. So they played school every night and tried to sleep during the days when people would come. Angela always told her things, quiet things about outside world. And while there was cruelty there as well, he told her all the beauty describing until the late hours of their solitude, all of God's creation outside, birds and butterflies and trees, the sky. He said she was the first person in the whole life that ever bothered listening to him. It had to be the reason God sent me into this world to bring these images to you, he would often and happily say. Sometimes screams followed by loud cursing and almost animalistic sounds of ravishing and torment are heard in the dark. Again, more screams and sudden silence. The guards often said Angela is an idiot and doesn't have the common sense to be afraid. Or perhaps it was because they think he can't hear the screams, but he doesn't have enough fear. That's why they don't take his blood. Angela said you need to learn how to act so they don't hurt you. If they look like they want you to talk, act like you can't hear. If they scream at you or try to hurt you, play dead. They can't stand that and actually will leave you alone usually. He has never told her what he sees when they take him alone, especially when they take him past the altar into the deep tunnels behind. Often he has cuts on his arms and legs, but just turns and presses his face against the bars as the tears roll down his face. Her songs put him to sleep. Whatever they do to him down there, it's usually made him so sleepy he can hardly open his eyes. One time the boy got caught whispering to her when the hunchback suddenly stepped out of the shadows. He shocked their cages. The shock sensations burn everywhere their skin touches the bars, which are on the floor or the walls of the cage always sit in. When this happens, pain and intense shock grips every muscle in her body and light blazes in her eyes, almost as bright as the most intense light she's ever dreamt. The quiet of the night leaves time to talk. For the two children in the cages, talking is the only thing close to playtime. Where were you before you came to this horrible place? Pedro asked the boy, lying in the cage next to him, plucking on the bars. Before I came here, I was in a much worse place, he said to her softly once after seeing a demon fly by. Demons everywhere. And even though I had a hood on my head most of the time, sometimes tied inside of a sack, I could see them flying around everywhere, even more than here. But they can't see you if you don't look at them. It's the witches that are the real evil ones, he, he said she already had seen many times in her life. They come in all sweet and act like they're your friend, then turn on you, adding betrayal to their hate. Don't trust them, he said with a smile. You can always tell a witch. They stink. It is because they are rotten inside. Better to not even look at them, or certainly don't talk to them. They hide in the shadows, so better not to look too much in that direction either. She remembers one time sensing something in the dark, then looking to, and seeing what looked like an old woman walk by, but it was one of the demons moving past in the shadows. She made a mistake of looking at it, and suddenly it turned and sprang out, the angry hunchback dishing out pain to them both. They never made that mistake again. Angelo always says we need to keep our secrets, our talking together from the demons, especially our eyes. If we don't look right at them, they can't see us. He said, if it's one of God's laws, he always talks to her about God, telling her all the wonderful things God has done for him already and how much more when they get out of here someday. Clank. The sound of a door far off in the tunnel jars her thoughts back to the darkness that is her home as she slows her breathing and tries to play like she's unconscious or dead. She can hear the Dr. Demon speaking with someone else, another man with a deep voice, but similar to his own. The man is doing most of the talking, and Damien seems upset. She can hear the cart being pushed. Hopefully, they're bringing Angelo back. No better. Hopefully, he's escaped. He has tried more than once occasion to escape, but they always come back telling her he would never leave without figuring out how to free her as well. The two men are deep in conversation as they approach her hallway. As Dr. Damien steps up, he is agitated, but seems to be angry with the other man who is speaking at him. You haven't produced any results, barring the few contributions you scammed away initially when father first died. The larger man says in a deep voice, we can no longer afford the luxury of maintaining this spider's hole of yours. Damien opens the cage on the cart as he prompts the boy inside to climb into his cage next to Pedro with minimal assistance. She watches through her eyes almost closed, acting like she's asleep. The boy settles into his cage and turns himself to sleep. He seems like he's been given drugs. The boy is about as useful as the rest of this place, the large man says to the doctor as he watches the transfer of the cages. He doesn't have the sense to even be afraid or scream. What good is he? He is indicative of the quality of specimen our brother has been sending through recently, the doctor says, cynically smirked, then adds, another piece of homeless trash. Apparently this one was found sniffing around father's old lab. It would have been nice if this facility was connected with the rest of the network in the area, as I've requested on multiple occasions, Damien says as he slams the cage closed and sets the lock. I'm not our father. Both you and Gordon have always had it much easier. The recent requests of your companies are impossible. All of father's efforts since I was a child have been primarily super soldier enhancements. So to suddenly switch to an older program from back in the old country is ludicrous. The requests are more for more enhanced versions of these pills, of his pills. I found no additional work in any of the files since we came to this cursed desert. I've been through all the files a dozen times here and in the lab at the depot, and I need more samplings to experiment with. These are not requests, you fool, the large man says, now in a commanding and condescending voice. We all work with the tools we've been given and produce results, otherwise they will contract others and we will be out, all of us. The man almost spits angrily as he pulls the younger brother's arm forcibly to listen. And we both know the reason you desire this location. It's all about your desires and the little to do with the lack of supply. Your constant complaining to hide facilities and mistakes is playing on my patience. Maybe Merlin is right. You're the wrong person for the job, and we need to concentrate our efforts on more productive and cost-effective sectors. Damien immediately froze with the mention of other man's name. No need to bother the high table with my feeble needs, he says nervously as he ushers the larger man back into the hallway of light. I'm sure I will produce results soon. Please assure Lord Morta that I am more than grateful for all of his generosity and patience. I could just use a little more funding for myself and my family, that's all. Share a little of that wealth you've taken from our inheritance of fatherland, brother. The doctor says, poking at an old wound of the middle of his brother, usurping command of this brother's years ago. We all should have to receive portions of father's company. Just because you worked there didn't make it all yours alone. Those companies were nothing before I took control. Any value after father died was of my own creation, and you would be wise to remember that when you address me, brother. Damien cowls as the larger man pokes him aggressively in the chest. And I hope for your sake, you will keep your big mouth shut as to regarding our connection to whatever heritage you so desperately think you have rights to. Just remember this, brother, you were not born in the fatherland, but I was. When we all came from the East, we gave up everything. We came with only our clothes on our backs. Any benefit we have from the work performed then is ours, mine, to use and dispense as I see fit. You would be wise to remember the role you were born into, little brother. Yes, my lord, Damien says as he cowls further. They both start to turn as the larger man spots the little girl in the cage next to the boy, back in the shadows. What is this? You come to me begging for bodies when you have two watchers? The larger man says with a cynical stare. What is this? Damien says with his own measure of cynicism as he turns to walk back into the light flowing, following his older brother. Is me having to again deal with my family's fallacies and mistakes, he says as he pushes open the outside door into the lit hallway. His brother leads him out of the building without a single word or look, not once seeing the satisfied look on the doctor's face, but finally having the final word with the great Herman Schlechten. Many fading steps in the final clack mark when Petra realizes that they have finally left the building and the children are alone again to start their real day. Before here, was that your home? Petra asked the boy a few hours later when he finally stirs awake again, trying to wrap her mind around the ideas of a home. I hear handlers talk about going home when they leave this place. It always sounds wonderful. No, it was a school or another foster care home they brought me to when they caught me, he said. The day the man came and took me from that place, it was truly a miracle, he said as he suddenly started talking, afraid again. The place was so full of witches I could hear the demons screaming worse than even when we have to watch here. I prayed to God to help me because I knew I wasn't where I was supposed to be. That very moment, one of the handlers came in and I knew I was being brought to where God wanted me to go, Angela said with a soft kind of voice. There was something about the man that was different. I think he might have been an angel sent to rescue me from them. Then why didn't he just let you go? Peter asked. He brought me to you, Angela said, with all the content voice of someone who knew something absolutely. Angels are not here to do things for us. They just help us out once in a while to kind of even the score, especially when we're facing demons. And that is pretty much all the time. I found a dog once. He just showed up for a little time, a little dog. I called him Chuck, Angelo said, as his voice cracked, a little telling the story. I was coming from my home, and the dog suddenly started following me around. Most of the time, I barely had enough to eat myself, but I always managed to have a little extra for Chuck. Sometimes I would go to some of my favorite dumpsters where I would find food after they closed. I would leave Chuck back home because I didn't want him barking, Angela said as he made a bark sound like a dog, and Peter started to laugh. I wasn't stealing, the food was being thrown away, but I learned to keep quiet when I searched. The owners didn't like it. One man came out tossing some food into a dumpster with a smile. I thought he was being kind, only to then come back and throw burning grease on me. Luckily, it missed most of my skin. It mostly covered my jacket, but the smell plus the cold ruined my jacket and I got sick after that. I learned to always keep quiet, Angela said. It burned worse than the shock sticks. One night I was coming back from the dumpster crossing a big dark parking lot and train tracks when a big man and his wife walked by arguing. The woman didn't see me, turning and suddenly running to the side right into me, and we both fell to the ground. The woman only landed on her butt, but I fell. My food I found fell all over the ground. The man grabbed me, picked me up off my feet, and started beating me in the face as his wife, and he laughed like demons. I used to carry a knife, a small one in my pocket, but it was sharp. My hand reached into my pocket and I felt the knife. Angelo's voice got soft and a little angry. In my head, I could hear a voice, and it wasn't God saying with a whisper, "Take your knife and stick it in his heart. He deserves it." I paused, holding the knife as he hit me again and again, but I let go of it as the man left, pulling back his huge fist. I just knew he wanted to kill me. Angela was said with a choked sound. Chuck attacked out of nowhere, biting the man's leg. The huge man screamed. He tossed me aside and started hitting the dog over and over, and then kicked him long after he was dead. Angela's tears were clear, even if Peter could hardly see his face. Chuck wasn't a dog. He was an angel set to take the beating so I would live. Angels are people. We never know who we are talking to when good ones show up. With a sniffle, Angela changed the subject. I have a home. It's a wonderful place. Like here, when birds sing, as he went on to tell her about his warm blanket and all his friends that share food with him when they can. Angela told her about Jesus. She relayed her own stories of seeing a bearded man in her dreams and sometimes walking up to the cage at night, often when the birds sing in the morning. Angela told her how Jesus was the Son of God and how his spirit rests in all of us if we wish. That's why I'm not afraid, he said. As a matter of fact, he really hasn't felt any afraid since Angela spoke of him. She really hasn't herself either. Demons are more afraid of us than we are of them, Angela said with a smile in the dark, because we have God's spirit in us and they know it. She sits in her cage and thinks about all the wonderful stories he's told her, beautiful stories he read in the Bible he had at his home. One day when she gets out, he will teach her to read and show her all the beautiful books God has given him. He has more than can be counted in the place where he lives. He has a home. He's kept his most precious things, all the gifts he's been given by God, a hidden place God showed him in an abandoned, broken down door in tall grass of an old storage building in the center of town. She loves when he tells her these things. Her mind drifts back to the story he told her. He tells her, and in the late of night, as she can hear them talking. The homeless of that area are afraid of this place, he told her, lying in the dark one day on his side, whispering to her through the bars, believing it's haunted, but I know it's not. At least not like this place. They both have seen demons that walk by many times during the night and even the days, even a few in the middle of the night. And Angela taught her to watch them without looking at them and never in their eyes. How do you know these things? She asked him softly. It's quiet and peaceful all the time at my home. Demons never come there except once in a while. A ghost, an old man in a military uniform wearing a white coat comes, Angela said, almost laughing in the dark. He never bothers me and seems to come in all the time at the same time at night, exactly 1:19 at night. The first time I was sleeping in the room with all the books and I hear a noise and woke up, seeing the old clock on the wall at that time, the old man stepping out of the wall and starts rummaging through the stacks of boxes of papers and charts stored in the office, he said. At first I was scared watching from the inside of my blanket. I found, but he never looks at me, just picks up the same box and walks out through the wall. It's some kind of chemical lab or something, I think, he whispered. Petra hardly understood what he was describing, but images appeared in her head as he described what he was seeing. He picks up the same box and leaves. One time late, I saw him walk out of the building and disappeared down the tracks from outside. Angela whispered. Voice took on a solemn, warning tone. I heard someone say you should never look directly at them. So I would watch him without looking at his eyes. He always would carry the box through the wall and then disappear. Many of the other homeless in the area are scared of seeing the same ghost sometimes walking out of the building. He went on to tell her, nobody goes anywhere near the building. It's a perfect place for me to sleep. Plus, it's warm. And another time, Angela told her about the day he was caught. It was my own fault, he said. He was coming back late one night, walking across the dark, empty storage field and train tracks to his hidden hole in the fence in the back behind the building. He made his first mistake that night being out way too late after dark. And then, just like here, I would feel someone or something was looking at me, but I ignored that too. He described feeling something like the hair on the back of his neck standing up, but he kept hurrying to his little hidden hole in the fence. This time he paused and turned back to see what he thought was the shadow of a demon in the dark. I tried to see it, and the minute he looked out, it sprang out, an old woman. He thought it was just some homeless woman sleeping. She shocked him, and when he woke up, he was in a juvenile detention school with a hood over his head, tied to a chair. That was a worse place than this, he said, almost not believing in himself. There are so many demons roaming around, crawling on the walls and the ceilings, even slithering around like snakes, even touching me sometimes. But no matter what they did, I wouldn't look at them or even say a word, he said. When you act stupid and ignore them, they don't like it. It takes away their power, he adds with a little giggle. They leave you alone. Angela taught her many things softly when it was quiet, how not to look at the demon's eyes or to talk, and how not to cry out loud, no matter what. It's the sounds they want, Angelo tells her, saying it was the witches. He hears them sometimes talking, and since they think he's stupid or he can't hear, they just have no idea he's listening. They are the stupid ones. He lives on the streets for years, running away from every foster home they put him in since he was 9. He didn't remember his parents, yet Child Protective Services told him they heard him and abandoned him to die, finding him in a closet when he was little. So many times they would bring him from one foster home thinking he was going someplace good, or to school just to be part of some ritual, or bad or worse than those that he'd already seen, hunting parties, or worse, having to watch these demons do horrible things to children, even eat them. He wouldn't have told her that if she didn't see it herself once. He said they told him his mother was a prostitute and his father was an alcoholic who beat him as a child, and that's why he couldn't hear. But since they're mostly evil and they lie, evil people are liars. So you can pretty much assume everything they tell you is a lie and the opposite is the truth. Angelo often would say it with a smile. Plus, the only beatings he ever remembered were the ones he received from foster cares where he was put in, or from the Child Protective Service officers themselves when they would caught him after he ran away. But he never believed them. He only had good memories of his parents, even if they were only in his dreams. Petra also talked about how good her parents was and how she could almost remember their faces, especially their voices, maybe from her dreams as well. She knew her mom had white hair like the brightest light, and her father was so good and strong. If he ever knew she was here, he would come and rescue them with his bare hands. The two children laughed together in the dark, not all too different from a couple of kids on the playground in a park. As their laughter fills the dark tunnels, a shimmer of light can almost be seen by both of the children as a group of angels suddenly seem to be dancing and also enjoying the show. A loud clank can be heard far down the hallways through the air vents, signaling the children it's time to be silent and settle into sleep. Play dead, Angelo says, as he likes to call it. Nothing they say or do has any effect on us when we do this. Page remembered this, at least stopped Dr. Demon from making them participate with any of the chants the evil witches did when they came the last time. Even Patron knew long ago she just wasn't to look directly in the eyes or directly at where they were telling her to. The evil just couldn't seem to touch her. We only play dead or act like we don't hear, Angelo said with the sweetest smile. Even in the dark, she could clearly see reflecting from his delight in his eyes. They are dead. Those monsters, that's why they do those things. It's our life and the light God gave us they want, but they can't have it. And no matter what they do, they will never be able to take it away from us because God gave it to us. The good ones know this, like Chuck, like our parents. Hopefully one day we will see it too. With only the slightest whisper and almost a lit like a song, Angela said, "Good night, Petra. Good night." So, my friends, that was chapter 14 of Angels and Angelo. This is the Hooded Vigilante reading Hunting Fields by Dr. Peter Colla. You have a good and blessed Thanksgiving. Wouldn't skip a day. And the next installment will be coming out Friday, or probably I'll be recording it Friday. And you'll be receiving it after that. Bless you. Take care.